Welcome to the Human Momentum Podcast. I'm your host, Erik Schabert. I created this podcast to leverage 12 years of osteopathic medical training and over a decade of experience in primary care medicine to help sort through the confusing and sometimes contradictory health information found on the internet. I want to distill all this information down to a form that you can use every day to optimize your health as you move forward through life. So if you are looking to get to life's finish line with the ability to do the things you love intact, then this podcast is for you. If this is your first time here, please don't forget to smash the subscribe button and throw us a like as well. It really helps us get this information out to more people. With all that said, let's move on with today's episode. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Human Momentum Podcast. I'm going to talk today about some recent changes made by the Food and Drug Administration. And I think it's fair to say that I really haven't seen eye to eye with the current leadership of the Department of Health and Human Services, including Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. However, it gives me great pleasure to say that I very much agree with their recent, long overdue move to remove the black box warnings on estrogen products used for treatment of perimenopause and menopause. These black box warnings concerned risk for coronary heart disease, breast cancer, and dementia. Recently saw an interview with Dr. Marty Makary, who is the current head of the Food and Drug Administration, and he was 100% spot on talking about this issue. I've been getting a lot of questions from friends and family members concerning how reliable is this move. They've seen a lot of the things coming from the DHHS, including some of their statements about autism and vaccinations, and they are understandably concerned that this pull to remove warnings on estrogen products might actually represent a problem. I'm here to say, though, that this is a move that is strongly grounded in the available scientific research, and one that should have probably been made a long time ago. As a matter of fact, I will go so far as to say that based on the available scientific research, we never had good cause to place black box warnings on estrogen products to begin with. I think it is helpful to go back and review how we got to where we are. I began training in osteopathic medical school in the year 2000. At the time I started, about 40% of women over the age of 50 were receiving hormone replacement therapy with estrogen or combined estrogen-progesterone products. And there was a strong element of the medical community. It was advocating for far greater usage of these products, and that women's health, cardiovascular disease, osteopathic fractures, all of these things would be reduced significantly if we used more hormone replacement therapy. But then there was an earth-shattering change in the fall of 2002. A study called the Women's Health Initiative was initiated in 1998 with the intent of being an 8-year study of the effects primarily on cardiovascular disease of estrogen replacement therapy and estrogen plus progesterone hormone replacement therapy in women. It was a large study, a prospective study. It was double-blind, and it was done with placebo control. These are usually things that lead to high-quality scientific outcomes. In this case, though, we had a problem. The researchers went to the media in 2002, having stopped the estrogen plus progesterone arm of the study early, and they went to the media after this early cessation of the study with a claim that they found that the Premarin, synthetic estrogen plus synthetic progesterone arm of the study, was showing HRT increased the risk of breast cancer, coronary heart disease, and probably dementia. I don't know what it means to probably increase the risk. In science, we should be quite definitive and be able to say this does increase the risk or this doesn't increase the risk. So that alone was a little problematic for me. But this research made the rounds through the mainstream media and was very rapidly acted on by our federal government, resulting in black box warnings on estrogen and estrogen plus progesterone products used for hormone replacement therapy. One of the problems with this is that about 6 months later, when the study actually passed through peer review and was published, and to explain this, I need to explain a little bit about what happens with studies. What happens is the data is collected, it is interpreted by the researchers, and they write up the study, and they submit this usually to a peer-reviewed journal for publishing. And what a peer-reviewed journal means is that the journal will send this to experts in the field, have them read the study, and they will chime in as to whether or not the interpretation of the results by the researchers was accurate, inaccurate, whatever. Well, that process very frequently leads to the original authors having to revise their write-up and particularly restate their conclusions. And that was the case with the Women's Health Initiative. The researchers had to restate their conclusion with regards to breast cancer risk, coronary heart disease, and dementia, and admit that the increase in incidence that they saw did not rise to the level of statistical significance. And that's a big deal. Let me explain what that means as well. If something rises to a level of statistical significance in a research study, it means that there is a 95% or better chance that the reason we saw the outcome we are describing is because of a causative relationship. There is less than a 5% chance that it is due to either random chance or it's due to some other confounding factor. So what we saw in the Women's Health Initiative is none of these outcomes that they were concerned about, that they were pushing for black box warnings on estrogen products for, none of those outcomes rose to the level of statistical significance. That means they could very well have been due to random chance. We are talking about, with regards to breast cancer, in that Premarin group, out of the rate was such that if 10,000 women were given estrogen products for a year, they were seeing in the estrogen plus progesterone group 37 cases of cancer out of 10,000, as opposed to 30 cases out of 10,000 in the placebo group. And that is such a small difference in absolute risk, in other words, in the actual incidence of cancer, that we cannot say it wasn't just simply due to a random chance that we put more women who are going to develop cancer in the estrogen plus progesterone group than we saw in the placebo group. We need to see a greater disparity in incidence to be able to say that it's causative. And this was very much a mistake by the researchers when they went to the media early. They were making statements that the estrogen plus progesterone treatment, the Premarin treatment, was causing more breast cancer. It was causing more heart attacks and strokes, and it was causing more dementia. And the data simply did not support that conclusion. Even more astoundingly, when a 10-year follow-up of the participants in the Women's Health Initiative was done, they saw that there was no difference at all in breast cancer mortality between the two groups. So even if it did cause a few more cases of cancer, it definitely didn't increase mortality. That doesn't make sense. This is further support that what we were seeing was just noise and was not something that we actually should be putting weight on. Another interesting point is that when we had a full statistical analysis of not Prem Pro, but just Premarin, Prem Pro is estrogen plus progesterone, Premarin is just synthetic estrogen alone. So there was one arm of the study that was comparing women who had had hysterectomies, placing them on Premarin and comparing them to women with hysterectomies who were on placebo. And in that group, they actually saw a statistically significant lower incidence of breast cancer than in the placebo group. Very much contradictory to the results that they were going to the media with. We also saw a decrease in the estrogen-only arm on the 10-year follow-up, and a decrease in breast cancer mortality, a decrease in coronary heart disease incidence over those 10 years, and a decrease in the development of dementia in that group. Also, and just as importantly, they saw a reduction in all-cause mortality. Very suggestive that estrogen therapy is helpful, not harmful. So everything I have been discussing here very much in detail discusses the reasons that we have to think that estrogen plus progesterone replacement therapy or estrogen therapy alone in women with a hysterectomy is safe. But I think we need to talk a little bit more about how effective it can be in treating problems associated with menopause. A lot of people, all they're aware of with menopause is that you have vasomotor symptoms, women get hot flashes, this is kind of problematic, but it's just a matter of dealing with discomfort. That's the thought process. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. I think more people are aware that as women go through menopause, their risk of breaking bones becomes higher, that they can develop osteoporosis, which is a deficiency in bone mineral density and integrity that can cause their bones to fracture very easily. What largely I don't think is known is that to this day, the most effective tool we have to prevent pathologic fractures, that is, fractures that should not happen in aging women, is estrogen. It's not just about bone density when it comes to preventing fractures. Not only is estrogen good at increasing bone density, it also increases the quality of mineral that is laid down in bone and the quality of bone matrix we have. It makes bones more resistant to fracture by its very nature. And because of this alone, I think we need to consider hormone replacement therapy in any woman who doesn't have an absolute contraindication for it. We also need to look at musculoskeletal health. There is something called the musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause. And what this means is that all of the connective tissue in our joints has estrogen receptors. These are most important in women. The testosterone receptors are a little more important in men. But if these estrogen receptors are deprived in women as they move through menopause, it can lead to a lot of problems. As for instance, the number one risk for developing a frozen shoulder is being a woman who has gone through menopause. And so because of that, if we do hormone replacement therapy, we can keep women in a state where they have less discomfort, can be more active, and thus be generally healthier. Okay, and finally, we have to talk about urogenital health. One of the things that happens to a woman as she passes through menopause is we lose estrogen stimulation of the bladder, the urethra, and the vagina. And when these structures inevitably atrophy a little bit because they're not getting estrogen anymore, we see an uptick in urinary tract infections, and we see increased incidence of pain on intercourse and loss of libido. All these things are very important to quality of life for women, and the UTI thing is actually important because it can be a very common cause of mortality in women as they age. It also can result in damage to their kidneys. It can result in bladder issues. And all in all, it's an excellent reason to treat with hormone replacement. Well, one of the things that happened because of how powerful this presentation of the Women's Health Initiative was and how powerful the misinterpretation of its data was, we have a generation of physicians who came through training thinking that hormone replacement therapy was potentially harmful to their patients and should be avoided. And we stopped educating effectively on menopause, the problems associated with menopause, and how to effectively treat with hormones. It's something I'm having to relearn myself because almost all of my training with regards to HRT occurred during the very beginning of my time in medicine, and I am well removed from that now. It's been more than 20 years, and I am going back and educating myself now, but we need more physicians to do this because every woman should have access to a primary care physician who is well informed on what the risks and benefits of HRT are and can have that discussion with their patients. And now we no longer have the additional barrier of black box warnings on the supplement or on the things that we will prescribe to treat menopause, and having a patient have this great discussion with us, be gung-ho about going home and trying estrogen plus progesterone, then reading this label on the product that says this can cause breast cancer, heart disease, and dementia. So with that barrier removed, I think we are in a place where we as physicians can get knowledgeable on this topic, can have informed discussions with our patients, and see if interventions are appropriate for them. I hope this was helpful, and this is obviously the promised full-length episode that I teased in one of my shorts earlier this week. If you found this helpful, please do subscribe to the podcast and throw a like on this video. It really helps it get out to more people. And if you have a woman or someone who knows a woman in your life who you think could benefit from this information, please do share it with them. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.